Now we move on to our media picks of the month, and I have to say, I'm going to touch wood
Yes.
right now. I'm just going to quickly touch some wood. Hopefully, we can get through this without too many technical problems. Because again, yeah, the edit will hide some of the issues that we've had this month, but for some reason, London has just been semi-cut off from the rest of the world. It seems from the internet this month. Um,
Some would argue that we're cut off the rest of the country at least, and have been for decades. But anyway, that's a
some
story.
some would argue that way. But hopefully we can get through this relatively smoothly. And I'm going to begin by talking about my media pick for the month, and that is a TV series called Timeless. It's not super serious. It's not going to change your life, but it is an interesting little show that we came across on the Netflix recently. My lovely wife and I. It only had two seasons. It was cancelled seemingly unceremonially at the end of the second season, and it is extraordinarily America focused in terms of the people who are involved in this adventure are it's intimately involved in the shape and the form of America as it comes out of the crucible of its own history, and obviously it's got some of those cliche things like we see in Time Cop and Back to the Future. There's good guys, there's bad guys. The bad guys at some point travel through time. Maybe the good guys aren't as good as you think they are. Maybe there was nefarious schemes in the background. It's all that sort of stuff. But what the reason why I'm recommending it, even though it is a bit sloshy here and there, is that I have enjoyed uh, seeing seeing American actors in an American show exploring little moments in their history in ways that aren't always massively deferential. And I mean that in the context of movies like, for example, um, National Treasure, where every time the Declaration of Independence is mentioned, there's a great swell of music and this sort of uh, in this show, it is glossy, and like I say, by no means do you get to see warts and all portrayals of history, but you get to see the complications of, for example, the reality of um, uh, President Kennedy's relationships with women. Um, you get to see elements of the realities of Al Capone and how he was one way in public and another way in private. And you also, as well, you get a hint, I would say, of I suppose self-reflection almost in the series of what used to be called, I think, manifest destiny in the American context. This idea of America
Yes.
being destined to be what is now a world power. Uh, you get that being quite, I think, quite carefully explored and examined and pulled apart here and there, and I think that's quite cool. Also, I really enjoyed. There's an episode where they go back to the Chicago World's Fair, and some of our heroes. It's a bit of a plot twist, but it's fun. Um, they end up in H. Holmes' torture castle, or murder castle, as he called it, the hotel that he set up with astonishing foresight and preparation, ready for the World's Fair when he knew people would be coming to town and wanting somewhere to stay, and he meticulously and astonishingly murdered people. So it was that was an interesting little moment in that show to go, goodness me, they've gone there. Wow, they're not just showing the World's Fair and what it achieved and things like foods and technologies that we take for granted now having their origins there, but also the fact that you had the serial killer running around the fringes. It was fun, and so I would recommend it. It's not, when I said I was watching this on the Facebook page, people went, "Oh, well, it's a bit fluffy," but it's if you're in the mood for a bit of fluff, give it a go.
I've always been a sucker for that kind of. I've not watched this. I'll have to go and look it out now. Because I've always been a sucker for two things. One is counterfactuals, and the other one is this kind of time travel,
Hmm. Hmm.
time travel story. In the sense, what is archaeology except time travel? It's trying to put yourself back into the
Mm.
past. I
Mm.
know we like to dress it up as science and all the rest of it, but at a visceral human level,
But also, as you say, it is storytelling as well.
absolutely.
Yeah. Mm.
And in terms of visualization, I'm the generation that grew up with Alan Sorrell's drawings for what was the Department, the Ministry of Works, who used to
Hmm.
look
Hmm.
after our ancient monuments
Hmm. Hmm.
before historic England was even a glint in anybody's eye.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah, and they're incredibly theatrical depictions or cinematic depictions.
Mm, mm.
I'm also old enough and sad enough to remember a series. I think it might have been one of the Irwin Allen sci-fi series from the 1960s from American TV that was being shown when I was a kid, called Time Tunnel, where they took. It was done incredibly cheaply,
Okay.
it was this, it was a bit like uh, for people that watch Stargate, a Stargate type Pentagon black project developing this tunnel through time in this case, where the two characters ended up in the two leading characters who were both men, of course,
Hmm.
um, ended up in periods in history where the producers of the series were actually able to use library film from various historical epic films.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
they had the library footage to do the big crowd scenes and show the Roman army or whatever, and it'll be from some Quo Vadis or Solomon and Sheba or one of the 50s epics. Uh,
Sorry. So because they didn't have what we call like stock footage libraries, they were using time travel to get stock footage.
No. Sorry, no. The producers of the film would use they'd
Oh,
have to like cut scene. You go from this sort of cheap cardboard set of I don't know ancient Rome
right. I see.
to
Okay.
a
Yes.
clip
Yes.
from the movie of Quo Vadis showing the Roman army marching
Right.
through.
Sorry.
You know,
I slightly misunderstood you there.
uh,
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Right.
no.
Well, no, that would
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's probably still around somewhere on YouTube. And so
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I'm having a problem with earpiece this morning.
Well,
That's what I'm on top of everything else.
that would be an
Um,
amazing premise for a show though.
oh,
I'd love that.
absolutely.
I'd love to see a group of producers who, because they're fed up of paying
CGI
for the
technician.
rights for CGI, they just go,
For
we're gonna make a time machine. We're gonna go film Boudica.
absolutely.
Oh wow,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, we should do that. You know. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm.
yeah. No. I should learn that. It sounds great. It's no. I'll be honest. I'm usually a sucker for that kind of thing. And also, why can't archaeologists and historians have some downtime? Why can't we watch the fluff? Why can't we read a trashy novel sometimes?
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
As well as not always being the good guys, archaeologists are human beings too. They're not just for Christmas
Indeed, and we're not just internet celebrities either.
or, or influencers even.
Influencers, yeah. Your media pick of the month appears to be a TV show that caused a bit of a stir. The British Tribe Next Door. Uh, Bearing in mind, we don't want this segment to go on forever. Do you want to just talk a bit
No,
about that?
it was all, and actually, it almost became Muppet of the Month, and
Yeah.
then my nomination for Muppet of the Month, and then it became uh, slightly more. My view became slightly more nuanced,
Hmm.
but I think it's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, it's a Channel 4 series. It is a vehicle for somebody called Scarlett Moffat,
Mm.
who, a bit like Freddie, became famous through sort of what sometimes called Zoo TV, sometimes it, it's that people in her case, it's a series called Gogglebox,
Hmm.
where people are recorded watching TV programs and talking about them and essentially reviewing them. Scarlett Moffat's become a bit of a sort of media personality on the back of this. So, what? Well, you're a TV producer or commissioning editor at Channel 4. You have this hot personality in the tabloids and social media on the back of Gogglebox called Scarlett Moffat. She comes from the northeast. She's got a sort of her extended family are all good value because they're all great fun and they talk really articulately and they're very human people. What would you do to give them a vehicle to generate more viewers? What kind of program would you create for them?
Oh, so you're asking me.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe. Well, actually, I suppose you know, a nice thing to do would be to send them on a journey around. Britain or around the world. We can explore places with them and through their experiences, and of course, when they come home, back home to their house, their house specifically in
Hmm.
Britain, then we learn about
Or
what they've learned.
or or
So
or
I've set you
if
up
you
there.
are trying to pull permission the editors, yeah, you
You
decide
move the
to
house.
build an exact replica of their terraced house in the desert in Namibia, next door to the village of the local Himba tribe, and get them to swap lives and share experiences. Can I set this up actually with a quote from
Uh-huh.
Lucy Mangan, who gave it a very negative one-star review in The
Mm,
Guardian. She said, there are some truly fascinating moments that reveal to the uninitiated in the ways of semi-nomadic tribes in the Namibian desert,
mhm,
among whom I count myself, unsuspecting unsuspected depths to the cultural chasm. The first women to visit the house are perturbed by the idea of having a second floor and then flummoxed by stairs. Quote, "Are we climbing? Will we fall?" And they're intrigued by the hall mirror. Quote,
mhm.
"I thought there was someone the other side." And this beautiful image, it's like water on the wall.
Yeah.
But then she says, this isn't enough to justify the series, and even less so a series that, despite what I'm generously going to assume is the best efforts in the other direction, fails to avoid putting the tribe to the service of providing teachable moments to the Moffats and Scarlett in particular. The reaction in the mirror becomes the story of Scarlett's insecurities about her body, as does the tribe's people's desire that she wear their traditional dress.
Mm, mm.
So the idea is it's actually it's actually there to show up the Moffats, not tell us anything about the Himba.
Mm,
But
mm,
you were going to say the the, the 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 other nuances that do come out in the India article, and I should just say when we're talking about that, the article is in the India on the India website. It was authored by Dr. Margaret Jacobson, who is a cultural anthropologist and an expert on the Himba. Now, it has to be said, she also worked as an independent advisor to the series, so she's not an unbiased voice, but she is a trained academic and has studied the Himba.
mm,
And I think we both agree made some really interesting points.
yeah. And indeed, it's in her observations that I found myself quite rightly uh, well, delighted actually and challenged. She says here, over and over, I heard how entertaining and fun the filming had been for the village. It was a welcome diversion from worrying about drought, and the people said that they had learned so much by living in close quarters with the British family and filmmakers. And I think the fact that she is writing from her particular experience and is able to say that really highlights that these meetings aren't always about a power imbalance between the colonial or post-colonial force and the natives, as it were, but actually these were humans seemingly meeting and being exposed to each other and learning. And it's interesting that she frames in that sentence this notion of worrying about drought. That is something that in another context would be seen as, and in some ways, it's very similar actually to how people talk about, say, prehistory. The idea that primitive cultures are always on the verge of survival. That they're always on that cusp of.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, um, worrying about drought in this context could be compared to other daily worries that we have. For example,
Well,
you and I are at the moment very concerned about what's going to happen next with Brexit. It doesn't have to be a case of one group is patronising the other. And I found that this analysis to be interesting. It surprised me in that sense.
yeah.
Mm.
I mean, there's a couple of points I just draw out from it, really, and just as we wind up
Hmm.
this segment and this month's watching brief. Um, I think the now it may be that they're not brought out as fully as they should be in the program, and it may be also that other reviewers have been so sensitive to the idea of cultural imperialism and cultural appropriation
Hmm.
that they haven't looked beyond those ideas to look at the potential and the nuanced view of what an exercise this might engender. Now, I have to say, the idea of building a County Durham house, a replica County Durham house in the Namibian desert is on the face of it utterly ridiculous.
Hmm.
Only a TV producer would come up with it.
Hmm.
No
And
sociologists
no,
or like cultural anthropologists would do a study like this
no, and also
because
frankly,
it's totally artificial.
yeah, and also frankly, the title of the series is ridiculous. The British Tribe Next Door. It's stupid. However,
Absolutely, they're not a
however,
tribe; they're a family.
yeah, however, as you were going to say,
Yeah, but um, there's again a couple of things. First of all, the the Himba aren't completely isolated from the 21st century.
hmm
In an echo of what I think is the situation with, for example, kids in the Amish
hmm
in America.
hmm
Um, it's pointed out that at least three of their young people are attending school in the town, which is called Apuwo, which is a few hours drive away from the village.
hmm
So they are exposed to the 21st century.
hmm
Um, but it also points out that only three of their young people want to live away from the village in that 21st century environment.
mm mm
That most of them want to stay.
mm
Um, and it talks about the wit and humour that are used by the people observing the number of simply just the number of possessions
hmm
that they have,
hmm
which they don't see the point of.
hmm hmm
Which is says interesting something interesting about our consumer society and the way we
Oh, I'm definitely
how
definitely guilty of that. All this crap
yeah
behind me.
exactly me too. Um, and the other one, which again ties back to we were talking in Muppetry in terms of of issues that are of concern to younger people other than remembrance, and one of them is climate change. And
Mm,
one of the points again that's made in this article is that the are critical but charitable about the people, the Moffats, who wasted so much water, and they point out the water was actually
mm,
trucked in the carbon footprint
mhm,
was trucked in for the Moffats to use,
mhm,
so they didn't have to use the same water supply that the Himba were, and obviously put strain on that.
mhm,
But it says that um, they were they were critical but charitable about people who wasted so much water. The British family and filmmakers had clearly not been taught how to behave more responsibly. You know, um, it, it is, you know,
Well, so
maybe that's something.
it's a surprisingly nuanced. I'm not saying it's a perfect example of, but it's a surprisingly
Yeah,
nuanced meeting of two cultures. And
yeah.
I would not. I'm glad that you've recommended this to me, or that you pointed this out this month, because I would not have given this series the time of day. I looked at it and thought that's just going to be hideous. I don't want to see it.
And,
But
and to be honest, most reviews have been really negative.
yeah,
I think
no,
it's fair
yeah,
to say.
yeah. Well, in that sense, and it all comes down to editing and content as well. Maybe it still is not the greatest show on earth, but it sounds as though
And no,
it was more
don't
nuanced.
get me wrong. It is absolutely far from that. It is
Hmm.
absurd.
Hmm.
It's an absurd idea.
Hmm.
As I said, nobody doing a genuine study of native peoples and so on would set up a study like this because it's completely artificial, as I said earlier.
Hmm.
But it may be that in producing something that's so absurd, it has actually given us the opportunity, and as Dr. Jacobson suggests in her article, it gives us the opportunity to maybe look back at the reflection of ourselves by seeing the absurdity of that house
Hmm.
in the desert
Hmm.
and saying, okay, have we got things right?
Hmm.
And do we need to look at the way we use the environment, we use resources and so on more deeply? And we're
Hmm.
starting to do that. I think, the climate change debate is making us do that.
Hmm.
And that you know, there is you know, as well as the questioning, maybe there's also an opportunity to learn. And again, not wanting to not wanting to over romanticize the role or nature of the Himba either. But full respect to them.
No,
they're fully rounded human beings with a very ancient culture.
yeah, but
You know,
in that sense, if you are thinking while watching, it sounds like an interesting forum for thought. In so much as it is tempting to make a direct connection between this comparison and maybe what Mesolithic people living in Britain would think of how we've chosen to live. You know, settled in one place. We don't use the resources that are around us. We don't really understand lots of the nature that's around us anymore. Our clothes are often relatively poorly made compared to Paleolithic ancestors. The issue though is that we shouldn't, and as you're quite right to point out, it's not the same. It's not the same as compare, because people in prehistory are not the same as modern living people in Africa. But the fact that you can in that instance directly compare two different ways of living, two different life ways, is very similar to what I find very compelling about prehistory. And when I talk, for example, to kids in primary schools about well, is childhood actually better now than it was then? When you compare the hazards of being able to, whether or not you're able to cross the road safely, to hunting a mammoth, or whether it's about, again, the meeting of cultures, and actually using it to criticize yourself as much as anything else, that I've been surprised by in your description of this show and also in that article. So
I think
I
I
may
think
take a look at it.
yeah, please. I think also again, I'd throw out one final thought.
Hmm.
In that the underlying intention of the filmmakers may also be somewhat satirical.
Hmm.
Um, there is that phrase about zoo TV,
Hmm.
about which goes alongside poverty porn
Hmm.
and things like that. Now, if you think about it, that, that plonking down a replica of a northeast terrace house in the Namibian desert,
Hmm.
having to truck in the water and the food and so on for the people who live there, they're the ones that are in the zoo.
Hmm.
The Himba are looking at the new exhibit in the zoo.
Yeah, they're the circus that's come to town. Yeah. Mm.
Exactly,
Mm.
exactly.
Interesting.
So a lot of complex ideas and some behind something that apparently is really crass and absurd,
Yeah.
and potentially would have been be seen as racist.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And indeed, thank you thank you to both of us. I think I deserve, we both deserve
It's been a bit of a marathon, hasn't it?
kudos for our marathon. In what will probably be quite a long watching brief, we've actually spent the better part of 4 hours recording this because of technological problems. So, uh,
But then, John Bercow, of the recently departed Speaker of the House of Commons, extended to who I think from originally just under half an hour. Prime Minister's questions had extended to an hour. So we're all good things don't necessarily come in small packages.
they don't.
On
They
the other
don't.
hand, they can also be very bloated, whatever. Anyway, um,
They can also have all sorts of issues. So, uh,
it's true.
yeah, pat on the back for both of us. Thank you guys for watching and or listening at home. And as ever, comment below, extend the discussions, and if there's anything that you want us to take a look at in next month's watching brief, please do send us an email or
And
let us know.
talking next month, Mark, can I just do
Hmm.
a quick heads up?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is really for our UK viewer.
Hmm.
Uh, we at the time of the last general election, we ran coverage, and also we ran an opinion poll about what archaeologists thought of Brexit, ArchaeoSoup and the Pipeline
Hmm.
website.
Hmm.
Um, we are planning on doing the same thing this general election, which is due in the UK on December 12th.
Hmm.
As soon as the party manifestos are published with their cultural policies, if any of them publish a cultural policy. We'll be covering that, and we'll be asking you to comment on them and what you think is going to happen in the general election, how you might be voting, what's guiding your vote, and so on.
Mm.
So watch out for coverage. It'll probably be introduced with a survey and a short watching brief special.
Excellent. Okay. Yes. I'm learning that as well, incidentally. Okay, great. We'll do that. We'll get right on that. Um, yeah. Okay. Right. Well, thank you everyone again, and thank you for your time, Andy, as ever. Okay. Bye
Thank you. Cheerio. Bye.
bye.